The Prevention of Sexual Harassment, or PoSH Act of 2013, absolutely reshaped workplace governance in India. But, here is the really shocking reality. A staggering number of organizations out there still treat its most critical requirement as just some administrative afterthought. So today, we're unpacking the absolute foundation of your PoSH compliance framework. We're going to look at the data, the strict statutory rules, and the very real, severe legal risks of getting this wrong. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll quickly cover the 10-employee mandate, the anatomy of the committee, a quasi-judicial power, common IC compliance gaps, the risks of noncompliance, and finally ask, is your IC sound? All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the 10-employee mandate. It turns out this mandate isn't just some best practice guideline. It is a highly specific statutory threshold that instantly triggers your legal obligation. 10. That's the magic number. If your organization has 10 or more employees, forming an internal committee, or IC, is absolutely not optional. It's a strict statutory mandate under Section 4 of the PoSH Act. And by the way, this applies to each and every office or branch your company operates. The second you hit double digits in your headcount, the clock starts and the law demands action. Yet, so many organizations either drag their feet on forming the IC, put it together incorrectly, or just treat it as a giant box-ticking exercise. But treating this as a mere compliance formality creates massive legal and reputational risk. Think of it like building a house. If the foundation is cracked, the whole structure is incredibly vulnerable. A defective IC fundamentally shatters your entire compliance framework. I mean, it doesn't matter how beautifully written your corporate policy is. If the foundation itself is flawed, the house is going to fall. Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of the Committee. You can't just, pick a few friendly managers, throw them in a room, and call it a day. The law requires a very strict mathematical and qualitative composition. It's basically a specific puzzle where every single piece is totally non-negotiable. You absolutely need a presiding officer, at least 2 employee members, and 1 external member. Every piece has to fit perfectly. And the rules for these roles are incredibly specific. The presiding officer, she can't just be anyone. She has to be a senior woman employee. For your employee members, and remember, you need at least 2, they must be genuinely committed to women's causes or possess strong social or legal awareness. The external member has to bring real experience in law, social work, or women's rights to ensure total neutrality. And here is the absolute kicker. At least 50% of the entire committee must be women. If even one of these requirements is missing, your entire IC might be deemed legally invalid. Which brings us to Section 3, a quasi-judicial power. Now, this is where organizations really need to wake up and pay attention. The internal committee is not just symbolic. It is officially a quasi-judicial body. What does that mean? It means it essentially acts as a legal civil court functioning right there within the walls of your office. They aren't just HR mediators. They are fact-finders and adjudicators backed by real statutory power. So there is a massive, stark difference between paper compliance and functional compliance. Paper compliance is just slapping names on a piece of paper so you can show it to a labor inspector. Functional compliance, on the other hand, is having a legally valid statutory mechanism that's actually capable of executing justice. Compliance is never just about optics, folks. It's about operational reality. Just look at the powers they have. They can formally receive and examine complaints, conduct full-blown inquiries, and call witnesses. They can review documentary evidence and even recommend severe disciplinary action and actual financial compensation. This committee wields massive authority over workplace disputes. They literally hold the careers of employees and the financial liability of the entire company right in their hands. Let's look at Section 4, Common IC Compliance Gaps. Despite wielding all that incredible authority, companies consistently make these totally avoidable administrative errors that carry huge legal consequences. These are the common blind spots that can completely unravel a company's PoSH defense. We're talking about appointing an external member without even verifying their credentials, or something as basic as failing to issue formal appointment letters. Crazy, right? Often, employees aren't even notified about who is actually on the committee. Other massive gaps include zero training for the members, letting the IC's tenure expire without bothering to reconstitute it, holding undocumented meetings, or just having workplace policies that are completely out of touch with current legal standards. These gaps drastically increased your legal exposure. So let's talk about Section 5, Risks of Noncompliance. What actually happens if you fall into one of those compliance gaps? Well, an improperly constituted IC can invalidate the entire inquiry process. If you miss even one tiny requirement, say your committee is only 40% women instead of 50%, or maybe your external member isn't truly independent, your IC is legally invalid. That means if they investigate a serious sexual harassment complaint, their entire ruling can be thrown out by a court of law simply because the committee itself was illegal from the start. And that invalidation exposes the organization to massive fallout. We're talking direct statutory penalties under the PoSH Act. You have significantly increased vulnerability during civil litigation. Then there's the catastrophic reputational damage, the deep employee distrust, the sudden escalation of workplace conflicts, and of course, harsh scrutiny from authorities. But honestly, most importantly, failing here completely defeats the core objective of the law itself, which is simply ensuring a safe, dignified workplace for your people. Let's wrap up with Section 6. Is your IC sound? Ultimately, it all boils down to this one critical question. Is your internal committee actually legally sound? Before assuming you're fully compliant just because someone from HR said, oh yeah, it was handled last year, you really need to dig a lot deeper. Run through this checklist in your head right now. Is the IC constituted exactly as per Section 4? Have formal appointment letters actually been issued to every single member? Is your external member truly qualified and independent? Have these members undergone proper, specialized training? Is their tenure still valid and properly documented? Is your company PoSH policy actually aligned with the Act? And are your annual reporting requirements actually being fulfilled? Look, if the answer to any of these questions is, I don't know, or maybe, you need a compliance review immediately. Because proactive compliance is, honestly, a hallmark of true strategic leadership. It goes way beyond just ticking a legal box. A properly trained IC protects your employees and your management, which directly reduces your litigation risk. And that reduced risk strengthens your organizational credibility, ultimately demonstrating real ethical governance to your team and your stakeholders. Review your compliance framework before a complaint arises, not after. I really want to let that sink in for a second. PoSH compliance begins and ends with the internal committee. Being reactive is simply not an option anymore. By the time a complaint is actually filed, it is entirely too late to go back and fix the foundation. So, if going through this explainer made you realize your organization might be exposed, please don't wait. Seek professional guidance for constitution, reconstitution, training, or full compliance audits at www.pnc.net.in. Ask yourself, if a complex, highly sensitive workplace harassment complaint landed on your desk tomorrow morning, would your internal committee be an airtight shield of justice or your absolute biggest legal liability?